Hello, my name is Waylon Lewis, and every week we'll bring you a new podcast with Elephant Journal. Hey friends, this is Waylon, and today we have yet another great interview with an amazing lady who is the producer, writer behind an amazing documentary that we're going to talk about, titled The Smell of Money. And if you're curious what The Smell of Money is, it's one of those kind of life-changing, perspective-changing documentaries. Hey, you.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi.
So we're joined by Jamie Berger. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. It's our honor and pleasure, although we'll get into it's a kind of profound meaning of pleasure because it's certainly a bracing film, a sobering film. Maybe can you lay out kind of the basics for us? I think a lot of us are familiar with some of the terrain, but not all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So The Smell of Money, it's a feature-length documentary. It follows a community in North Carolina who are up against the world's largest pork corporation, fighting for their rights to clean air, clean water, and just to be able to live free from the stench of animal manure. So in particular, it follows a woman named Elsie, who is the granddaughter of an enslaved man, and she lives on this property in eastern North Carolina that has been in her family for generations since the time of slavery. And she, goes away, goes to school after she grows up there, and then comes back to take care of her elderly mother. And when she arrives back home, she realizes there's this waste, there's this kind of stream of waste spraying down, raining down on her and her mother's home. And,
waste,
it isn't rain.
By waste, you mean, yeah.
Animal waste.
Yeah.
So she realizes the farmer next door is spraying waste, animal manure, feces and urine onto her home, onto her elderly mother's home.
Yeah.
And so for this, this starts for her a journey where, she becomes a really renowned activist for environmental justice, which is the fight for, equal opportunity to have access to a clean, safe environment, to be able to live on your land, enjoy your property. So she really kind of galvanizes this movement in North Carolina that's been going on for the past 30 or so years, more than 30 years now. And so the film follows her story and the story of other people like her and people who are fighting alongside her for justice.
So, for the kids out there, so they're spraying pee and poop on people's home,
right,
all day, every day. People can't.
That's right.
Here in Colorado, we've had wildfires and, a couple days to a couple weeks a year, we can't go outside because the air is so toxic. It's like that 24/7, 365, well, not 24, but 12/7, 365. I'm unaware if they do it at night.
They do spray at night, actually. Yeah, they do spray at night. Yeah.
So, in one little scene, and there's so many moving scenes, Elsie holds up a photo of her family enjoying a cookout. It's like a basic thing you can't do.
Right.
They can't go outside. And even inside, they find the pee and poop all over people's fridges and AC vents and everywhere, right?
Right, exactly. And just to kind of zoom out a little bit more, North Carolina is the second largest pork producing state in the country after Iowa. There are about as many pigs as people in North Carolina, and many of them are concentrated in this eastern part of the state. So as far as we know, this has the densest concentration of factory farms anywhere in the country and likely anywhere in the world. And they're all in this, again, this community that's largely Black and brown community, that's a rural, poor community. And so the waste that's generated by these animals, pigs produce about 10 times as much fecal waste, just the solid waste, compared to a human. And the reason that it's such a problem in this part of the state is that the waste is kept in these huge open air pits. So of course the animals are confined inside the factory farms, inside these kind of long metal sheds, these buildings. They have slats in the concrete floor for the waste to drop through, and then that's pushed out into, again, these, what the industry calls them, lagoons, which kind of brings about this image of, a kind of blue lagoon, perfect paradise, but really it's these massive open air pits the size of several football fields. And when those pits fill up with waste, the farmers have to do something with that. So what they do is they spray it over fields nearby under the pretext of raising crops, but really what it is just a cheap way of getting rid of all of this waste. And it's, it's not just urine and feces, it's also different kinds of chemicals, it's antibiotics, it's industrial sort of strength, cleaners, and
Like,
all different
yeah.
kinds of bacteria and toxins, exactly. So there's huge ramifications for not only, the environment, the water quality and air quality in the area, but definitely also for people's health. And just again, like you said, their ability to do basic things that many of us take for granted, like spend time outdoors and have a cookout and watch their children run around and play and not worry about them getting sick or having animal waste sprayed onto their bodies.
Yeah, well, you cover so much in this. The maps showing historic areas where slaves lived, overlaid with the maps of where this is happening,
Right.
are pretty much parallel. That's very powerful. On a personal level, you talk about, you call it the double-edged sword of racism, I think. Like, on some level, the filmmakers who are largely white, you know, have this privilege of, you're pulled over by the cops who basically are defending the pork mafia, and you feel safer. So in a way, you're using your privilege, which is very, thank you for that, to bring this story out to all of us. So hopefully we can care and help, these communities of color largely take action. It's not black and white, no pun intended. There are some heroes who are, it's largely the powerful versus the not powerful. But on the other hand, as filmmakers, you were very conscientious about not kind of platforming yourselves or white knighting. So how did you just, you're the writer producer. How did you look at how to tell the story, how to get it out?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, like you said, the two of us who were kind of filming and in the field with people over the course of this project, we were both white, myself and my co-producer and the director of the film, Sean. We do have a larger team now, much larger and more diverse team behind us, and a lot of people have contributed to this film in a lot of different ways. So we're grateful that it's not just been the two of us, but you're right, the two of us who were interfacing with the communities, who were interacting with people and trying to tell their stories, had our own, race and our own class and backgrounds to be really aware of and mindful of. I'm from North Carolina. I'm not from the eastern part of the state, but I think at least being able to say I'm from this state and I know what's happening here and I understand how important the land is in North Carolina, how important it is to protect, our families, just kind of coming at this, issue from a very sort of human perspective. I think that's really what brought us into it in the first place, is understanding that nobody wants to endure this. This is just a basic injustice that nobody should have to be subjected to. And we felt like we could really relate with people in that way on a just kind of a very human to human level. But that said, I think one of our biggest challenges in producing the film was trying to earn the community's trust. And that did take us a really long time. I think that's part of why it took us, 4+ years or so to film it,
Yeah.
because we would show up and people didn't have any reason to inherently believe in us and believe in the film and offer up their stories. In fact, doing so could put them at risk, because for a number of reasons. One, the industry is just so immensely powerful. It's impossible to overstate how far reaching the industry's power is in North Carolina. We had so many people tell us that they were afraid to speak to us on camera because they knew that they would potentially be retaliated against for doing so. Even people who work in the industry, but also people who, we had one woman who worked at a school, and she was concerned about raising her voice because she knew that the industry had so much power and was involved in the school board and would potentially go after her in her job if she were to participate. So I think that was one barrier. Again, also just our own background, our own differences, led people not to trust us. They had every reason to see two white filmmakers coming into this community and think they're not people that we should work with.
Well, you kind of covered that in that section where, what was it, Hurricane Florence came in and, drowned, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pigs, and there's rotting pigs and all the chemicals and all the waste. And it's, going out and poisoning all the people who live around it. And there's tons of media attention and, inspiration to change awful system that isn't working for human beings,
Right.
own animals, and then the media leave,
Exactly.
a month later or 2 weeks
Right.
later. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that's what we heard from so many people, that journalists had come in, other filmmakers had come in, told this story, kind of extracted bits and pieces of it, extracted those stories from people, and then would disappear, and the media would die down, and they
Yeah.
would never even know oftentimes where those stories ended up. So
Yeah.
I think it took us showing up over and over and over again over the course of many years, showing that we were invested, that we were trying to be accomplices in this fight and not just people kind of on the sidelines, or people who were replicating the systems of oppression that people were already dealing with by coming in an extractive way. And we certainly didn't do it perfectly. We learned a lot of lessons. We had a lot of, reflection about how we were approaching this, and the balance that we needed to strike between being filmmakers who want to, present a good story that's going to be captivating and compelling and bring people in and have people connect with the subjects, but also understanding that we're dealing with real humans who have so much that they're fighting, so many layers of injustice that they're dealing with, having their own family members be sick, having to, kind of balance what they say to be afraid, out of the fear that the industry might come after them. Like, we really had to be very cautious in the way that we approached this. And again, learned a lot. And just, I think the kind of big conclusion that we had was that we really needed to just take our time and keep showing up.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, Elephant is coming from this tradition of Buddhism, and a lot of what is ailing our world is this sense of speediness, which can lead to lack of caring.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really pay attention. That's kind of a definition of factory farming and our consumption of it right there.
Exactly.
But the slow filmmaking process, creating relationships, as being a journalist or a storyteller, like, when people open up, that gets really powerful.
Yeah.
And when you say people are sick, it's not just the older folks who you're profiling, but the children, people who are having their entire lives, like Elsie was going through this for 30 years, right? Or more.
Right. Yeah.
And, you think from a point of privilege, you think, oh, if the fires get too bad here in Colorado, I'll have to move. But they're not able to move because the homes don't have value. Is that right?
Right.
Like, the pork industry is also killing who would want to live there?
Exactly. Yeah, this is a question that we heard from a lot of people, and a lot of the people we were interacting with, told us. People ask, why don't we just move? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Like you said, there are plenty of studies showing that property values of homes near these kinds of facilities are lower. They have been affected by this pollution. So that's definitely one reason it's very difficult to sell a home in that area. Also, again, these families have been on this land for generations. It has so much meaning to them, being able after slavery to have this one piece of property where you and your family could grow and could cultivate, a garden and make memories. And, that is absolutely priceless to people. And so I think it's definitely, short-sighted, a sign of privilege to say, oh, well, why don't you just pick up and leave?
Right.
And really the question should be, why are these massive corporations allowed to locate these kinds of facilities in neighborhoods, in areas where we know people are already vulnerable, are already struggling, And so I think that's really the better question to be asking.
Yeah, it is privilege, but it's also just on a very basic human level, the idea of having poop and pee and chemicals, ammonia, etc., sprayed on you all the time. Your first instinct is to leave. And these people didn't have that option, or didn't want that option, as you said. I think Elsie's grandpa, had built the house she lived in.
That's right.
Her great grandpa.
Or her father did. Her father,
her father.
Yeah.
So why would you want to leave, as you said? And not ironically, I don't even know what word would cover it. The feces and all that were being sprayed from land that had essentially, it sounded like, been stolen from her family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. And I think that's really what started this for Elsie. It wasn't just the insult of having animal waste sprayed on her family. not just that injustice, but the fact that actually the farmer had stolen the land, had manipulated the deeds
Right.
to the land that, again, her grandfather had purchased after he was freed from slavery, and built this factory on top of it, you know. And so I think that was an experience that many Black families in the South dealt with, this loss of land, this you know, quite literally theft of land.
Yeah.
And then to have this, again, this massive polluting industry locate itself there is just really just insult to injury.
Yeah, there was sort of an offhand remark by someone you were interviewing that Purdue, I think they're chicken factory farming.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I barely know. They had, you know, put thousands of small farmers out of business. So this isn't a fight between farmers and people. This is a fight between this multinational Chinese-owned corporation. But even when they were US owned, they were just putting farmers out of business. The guy became a billionaire by applying what Purdue had done, right?
That's right.
I'm not telling you, you told me all this. Just explaining to people that it was, you know, I'm vegan, and it really hit me through the course of this that, you know, I often think about how animals are tortured, literally,
Mm-hmm.
and then murdered en masse. Again and again and again, but that's essentially what they're doing. Not even essentially, I can't even qualify it. They're torturing and killing human beings as well in pursuit of profits, and not even profits for a large class of people. It's not like middle class profits. It's, you know, profits for no one knows, the
Right.
owners, you know, the people who are really making out
Yeah.
like thieves.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
this is a question with a little privilege in it, but it's a genuine question. You know, just thinking about um, your kind of your and your director and your, you know, your crew's sort of mental health, like witnessing and feeling, caring about all this. Um, how did you guys take care of yourselves if this is a 4-year project and it's not even done? You then have to get the film out and all that. I mean, what an endeavor.
Yeah. I was, I mean, it's taken a lot out of us for sure. I think, you know, as it goes with any kind of long-term project like this, there are real ups and downs. I think the chance to spend time with people like Elsie and Renee and Naima and Don Webb and all of the water keepers, Rick and Larry, and everyone else in our film. I mean, these are just truly some of the absolute most wonderful
They were
humans on the planet.
amazing.
And
I was in love with
they're
that.
amazing.
That whole crew going to, you know the names better than me, but the whole crew going to the courthouse, Elsie
Yeah,
and the gentleman, and then
yeah,
Don Webb and his wife, and oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
I
So
was
they
like
were
in
just,
love with them.
we fell in love with them.
Yeah,
We absolutely fell in love with
yeah.
them. I mean, it was such an experience that I will treasure for my whole life, to be able to spend time with all of these people, and especially to be able to get to connect with Don before he passed away and Elsie before she passed away. I mean, that was just, it really was such a meaningful experience. Of course, so absolutely devastating when we got the news that they weren't well. And, you know, I think for me, another low point of the film was also after the lawsuits were over. So the film kind of chronicles these lawsuits against Smithfield, which, you know, in which about 500 residents of North Carolina take the company to court and say, this is not something that we should endure. You should not be allowed legally to do this to us, and you should pay us for that. So after the lawsuits, you know, this is a little bit of a spoiler for the film if you haven't seen it, but the residents won. You know, they won all 5 of the cases that went to trial, and then they won their appeal, and they were awarded money from juries in North Carolina. The amount that they won was dramatically reduced by a North Carolina law that caps the amount of damages that people can receive. So in the end, most people didn't get, you know, nobody got like a kind of transformative amount of money. There were many, you know, we spoke with, including Renee, for example, she was able to pay off some of her medical bills, but it's not like they got this huge windfall. And so I think for us, when we went back, for me, when I went back to North Carolina after the lawsuits were over and saw that not only had people not actually gotten a ton of money from this, but also the conditions hadn't changed. Nothing has actually changed in terms of the way that Smithfield is operating, in terms of the amount of waste that people are having sprayed on their homes. And that was a serious low point to see that after this 9-year legal battle and millions of dollars poured into this fight, after 30 years of this long-term fight. So that was my breakdown. That was my breakdown point. But I will say then, there's been this kind of rise in I think my well-being and my feelings of optimism and hope about this in the opportunity we've had to share the film with the world, as we've done screenings at festivals and done these kind of community screenings, being able to see how people react to it and see people who are impacted by this kind of issue, see their stories reflected in the film. That has been incredibly meaningful. So it's an emotional ride, but we've done our best. And I think in terms of kind of keeping in mind the heroes that we have in the film, Elsie in particular, she knew she wasn't going to win this fight in her lifetime. I think she really was totally aware of that, but that didn't stop her from persisting, from devoting her entire life after she, came back to North Carolina to trying to get justice for her family. Really, that's who she was fighting for, was her family. So that to me was always really inspiring, to remember that she just truly, literally never gave up and fought until the very end.
And even winning those damages and having those damages reduced, I think, was it Renee? You can correct me if it was someone else, but they were saying, look, I have like a lifetime of bad credit because of all the medical expenses, all the health issues I'm going through,
right.
And then they don't even get the money right away. It's appealed and then it's delayed. And I think you said you've given some stuff away. So, I'll mention that, like, Elsie, I don't think saw a dime of it in her lifetime. Yeah.
No, she didn't. Right.
And, not all that is besides the point. Like, one of the lowest points of the film for me watching was after they won that lawsuit, which is kind of a nice moment. Someone called it like David versus Goliath. They keep spraying the pee and poop and the chemicals like the same day.
Yeah.
Like there's no order for them to change. And I think someone, who was it, said, was it Don or Tom or someone said, like, that you could add 10 cents to the price of bacon and fix all this. You could change all this.
Yeah.
And process all this and create energy or whatever out of it, instead of poisoning North Carolina and the people on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, the industry could definitely change if it wanted to. And it has studied alternative methods of this kind of waste management, and in the end, it's come back and said, we're not going to do anything that's going to cut into our profits. We're not going to do anything that's going to make us have to pay for this. And only when they were forced to do that by, juries in North Carolina saying, you can't do this to our neighbors, this is wrong, only then were they actually forced to pay. And even still, it wasn't enough to actually prompt them to make any kind of significant change. And, now the industry is investing in this technology that they call biogas, or factory farm gas, which is essentially, they put a cap over the lagoons and they trap the methane and other gases that are emitted from it, and they generate energy from that waste. So they're claiming that this is, the next step for sustainability, for the climate, but in fact, it's actually just another revenue stream for them. It's another way for them to earn more money. And they're building pipelines through these very same communities that have already been fighting this for so long. And so they're, bringing this new kind of layer of this industry to North Carolina and other states. Many other states now are adopting this. And I think it's just a real sad kind of progression of things, because now they're saying, we're investing in all this infrastructure, we're building this clean energy technology, and really it's not actually addressing the fundamental pollution problems. The lagoon and spray field system is still there. They're still spraying waste on people's homes.
That's what I was going to ask. If they're capping all of it and getting energy out of it, are they still disposing of it by spraying on the paper? Yeah,
they are. And at least according to some studies, the waste is actually more harmful because some of those chemicals and, compounds are more concentrated in the waste. And so it's still causing, it'll still cause all the same pollution problems, all of the same health issues to people living nearby. It actually doesn't do anything to fundamentally address, the issue at hand, unfortunately.
So one of the eloquent voices in your wonderful documentary, Senator Cory Booker, we've had him on the show. Is there any kind of remedy coming from the political world, from leadership, from, I know, Kate Mara and others are behind your film, like from, people who have influence or fame? Is there any kind of remedy coming at any point other than, if your film can really galvanize the attention of America? Because Smithfield, I was also surprised or saddened to learn, is in something like 30 states. It's not just North Carolina, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, this film focuses on Smithfield in particular, but this is the case for factory farming all over the country and all over the world. This model of pork production and poultry production that was largely developed in the American South, and pork in particular in North Carolina, has been exported everywhere. I mean, you mentioned Senator Cory Booker, who's in the film. He's an amazing, outspoken advocate for change in this area. He has really fought hard for change to the factory farming system to improve the food system. And he's introduced a bill along with some other members of Congress called the Farm Systems Reform Act, which would phase out factory farms and put a moratorium on the construction of new facilities. So I'm hopeful that in the next, maybe a few decades, we'll see some progress on that. I don't think it's moved too far yet, but I think having that as it's kind of a guiding star that we want to eventually implement that kind of policy change where we have a true shift away from this system. I think that's going to be the best. And yeah, we're hoping that the film brings in voices like Senator Cory Booker's. It's brought in Kate Mara and her sister Rooney Mara and Joaquin Phoenix. They hosted a screening for us. Joan Jett hosted a screening for us. And we're really excited to see people using their platform to try to raise awareness about this issue. I mean, it's not glamorous. It's not flashy. It's, people getting shit on, literally, in a rural, poor part of the country. But I do know that anybody who watches it really feels connected to it and really feels fired up about it. And that's something that we hope will kind of allow us to build some momentum, bring some more, more of those voices in, and help us amplify the message of the film as much as possible.
Thanks for listening. Hope you're getting a lot out of it. The full conversation is on our indie platform that supports and continues our work, elephantjournal.com/videos. You can subscribe, listen, watch, and participate there. And when you do so, you'll keep these mindful videos and podcasts going. elephantjournal.com/videos. May it be of benefit.